I'm really pleased to have actually 1/4 of our entire caucus here. The leader of the official opposition, Kevin Falcon. We've got Greg Kylo, who represents Shuswap. We've got Jackie Taggart, who represents Fraser Nicola. Peter Millibar, who represents Kamloops North Thompson. All the way from Delta, dairy farmer Ian Payton. He represents Delta South. And then, of course, Lauren Dirksen, who is from Williams Lake. He represents the Caribou Chilcotin. He's John Deerdug, also the area representative of the TNRD. We immediately decided the common sense thing to do was to reach out to the ministry, reach out to government, and ask for a meeting with them so that we could actually ask questions, God forbid, right? Understand, what the science is, what is the basis for this decision. To date, nobody has heard from the minister. Nobody has received an official response from anyone senior in government. He contacted me late yesterday, and the Ministry of Forests did issue a statement. I won't read the whole thing, but according to the statement, there's nothing that we should be concerned about. We should all go home. It basically says, we know that farmers and ranchers are facing tough challenges. Access to water by food producers is crucial for food security for all of us. After significant study of aquifers in the Westwold area, the expert scientific opinion is that the aquifers are connected to surface water. This means that removing water from the aquifers at any depth has direct and meaningful impacts on the water levels of streams within the watershed, in this case, the Salmon River. Temporary protection orders are a last resort because we recognize the very real impact it has. Before being issued, significant technical work is done to gauge the connections between wells and affected rivers. The studies and data collected by the province indicate clearly that the wells in the Salmon River are connected to the river. This is not new or recently announced science. Significant outreach to individuals impacted occurred in the months leading up to this, and on it goes. The bottom line is that the message here is there is science that justifies this decision. We're not going to share it with you, but trust us.
So everyone should know this. Your being here is really, really important. Because one thing I've learned about this urban government, because that's what they are, it's an urban government, we should be really clear about that. They care about what happens in the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island and pretty much not anywhere else, is that the only time they react or get nervous about what's happening is when a group of people actually get together and start raising their voices as one. But it gets pretty damn frustrating when you got people that don't listen to local folks and have knowledge and skills. And we're here, we've got a lot of experience here too, by the way, in the ranching and agricultural sector anyhow. But we want to hear your voice, and I'll guarantee you this, we are going to take it to Victoria, we are going to raise the temperature as much as we can until we get them to back off stupid, short-sighted decisions that aren't listening to local folks that actually know what they're talking about. So thank you for coming.
We're on your side, we understand it. I'm so proud of my caucus because there's folks here that aren't here today that, between these folks here and Corley Oates and Shirley Bond and Bernier and Dan Davies, we get it. We understand agriculture on our side of the floor in Victoria. There's a blank stare about agriculture on the NDP side of the floor. And I'm sorry, but your agriculture minister right now has a degree in fine arts from the University of Victoria. So we need to take this seriously. Agriculture in this country used to be the top rung of the ladder back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and now it seems to be the bottom rung. There's no interest. Politicians, bureaucrats aren't taking agriculture serious. When I was a kid growing up in the 60s, nobody had irrigation equipment down in the Fraser Valley, but now with climate change and these hot, dry, droughty summers, if you don't have irrigation equipment, you're out of business. You're not farming or ranching anymore. And that's exactly what's happening to you folks by being cut off. There's no way you can survive as farmers and ranchers with whatever you're growing, crops, whether you're feeding, watering cattle, without irrigation water and potable water for your livestock to drink. So thank you very much, Todd, for this opportunity.
Good morning. My name is Bob Jones. I'm 82 years old. I've lived on the Salmon River all of my life. To me, this water in the Salmon River has not changed. We have had dry seasons similar to what we have this year. The salmon are still spawning, but they only come up when the water temperature is right. They're pretty smart. Approximately 10 or 12 years ago, that was the end of my term to test the water table of the aquifer on the well on Station Road. I did that for approximately 20 years, once a month. In the winter time, the snow plows would come along and block up that thing, and I'd spend days digging it out with an axe so I could do my job. The Salmon River Round Table was formed some years ago out of Salmon Arm. They were going to do some tremendous things to the Salmon River, going to bring it up so the salmon could spawn. Little did these people know that the Salmon River does not run above the surface in Westwold. It's dry. It may run from when the freshet starts till approximately April, March. That's it. 9 months of the year, the salmon can't swim because there's no water. It's below the ground. I kept copious records of it, and for that meeting at Silver Creek towards the end of, this would be 10 to 12 years ago, I spent days graphing out all my information so I could present it to them because they had the same problems. The fish were having problems. I took it out to that meeting, and there was quite a few from Victoria, and I said, I have a graph here, I would like to have it, if anybody would be interested in seeing it. A person at the head table said, no, we aren't interested. Well, my ego went down. A couple of people on the other side of where I was sitting said, I want that. It was from the Water Branch in Camels. And so what they did with it, I don't know. Have the field people that make these statistics and stuff, have they ever come out and looked and saw what happens on the Salmon River? It goes underground. What is the table of the aquifer? You don't need things to go down the ground. Go 5 kilometers down to the meadows that are down here. That's the water table underneath. That's where the aquifer is running. Water runs downhill and it goes up. Have you ever tested how much water goes in the upper part at various times of the year and test what's coming out? It's going to balance itself out. In the times that I did that on my graph, the water table, it didn't matter what the years were, how wet it was very constant and only varied a couple of feet. The lowest time of the aquifer was in the fall time from January, February, March. And nobody was using water. Nobody was using water. When the aquifer came up a little bit, that's when all of the sprinkler systems and people were using water, and the water kept rising, kept rising. It's a backwards aquifer. And that's, you don't need statistics. Look, you can visually go out and see it. Have these people that made this, all these decisions, ever done that? No. They read it in books. Theory doesn't always work right. What's written down, you have to go out and look at it. I think that's it.
Judo Creek is one of the major tributaries to the Sept, which goes into the Shuswap. And back in the 1800s, through Coldstream Ranch, etc., they diverted the biggest percentage of Judo to the west to flow down through the Columbia system versus coming to the east through the Shuswap River and into the Shuswap Lake, etc., to Fraser. Coldstream Ranch, this new egg crow product, they're still allowed to water. We came in this morning via Coldstream Ranch and see a whole bunch of rain guns shooting their water out onto the fields. We're shut down totally, and they can still run. The golf courses in the Vernon area seem to be beautifully green, whereas we can't water. They are, and I'd like to see a lot of that addressed, and like, how can Vernon City, we moved here in '59, Vernon only had about 9,000 people, now it's about 50,000 with area, and they use a heck of a lot more water today than we ever did.
But the Water Sustainability Act, I Googled it last night, went in there, clicked on it, and what I found really interesting is in, forget what section, but it's the protection of sensitive streams. It talks specifically about fish habitat, and I think it's section 88.3 states that any changes to orders or changes, I'm paraphrasing now, I'm not speaking specifically, but it says 88.3, I think it's 88.3, talks about consultation with the agricultural industry. So whoever made this Water Sustainability Act recognized that it's going to affect agricultural producers. And what I see and what I've seen, but I think it's very, very important that government understands that anything you do impacts, and what I realize is communication is key. I know all those natural resource officers that came out and had the unfortunate job of handing out tickets. They're all good people, and they are hired to do a job, which they do. Unfortunately, the people that are in charge of them, I don't see any here today, and they should have enough brains to say you go out and you communicate individually. You don't drive around in your truck. You get out and you talk to the people. And I find it quite interesting that 2 years ago, we had a major wildfire in this area. It was called the White Rock Lake Wildfire. I flew that fire a number of times as a range officer, and the areas that are most severely impacted were in the area of Beulah Lake, Little Beulah Lake, and that's one tributary to the Salmon River. The other one, I believe, comes from Salmon Lake. But when you look at the effect of a wildfire on spring freshet and on the ability of the land actually to hold the snowpack and release it, in the last 2 years since that wildfire, the spring freshet has been extreme. It's flooded the banks, 2 feet of water in areas that probably has not had since the last wildfire. But I would suggest, I phoned the ministry and I asked if there was a hydrological study done on the Salmon River post White Rock Lake wildfire, and to my knowledge, nobody had done one. And I'm thinking that if you have a very important, the 2 rivers that come to my mind, and they're drilled in your head because you hear it for 30 years, is the Coldwater River in Merritt and the Salmon River in Westwold. But when I see 20 feet of bank being taken out, and I'm thinking of salmon habitat, I would suggest that government should pay attention to what the siltation is going to do to salmon habitat and spawning if they don't address the issue of bank destabilization after extreme freshets 2 years after a wildfire.
But on a final note, Mr. Dinwoody, your comment about infrastructure, government needs to take a look at the efficiencies of pivot irrigation systems that are now dropping water down from about 3 feet above. And it more simulates actual rain, and it's the best, most technical way to irrigate your crops. Because like Todd said, and Kevin, you guys aren't dumb. You're doing whatever you can to lower your cost of irrigating, which lessens the amount of water that's being used. So good on you guys. And I'll never forget, Mike Dion stood up and said, "Where is this money going?" And the bureaucrats and the minister could not tell us where that $111 million was going to go. I think would be money better spent by improving infrastructure, by giving you folks the money to improve your systems of irrigating.
Hello, I'm Eric Buff. We're from here in Westwold. We're obviously involved in agribusiness and forestry. Forest operators that probably Ed's referring to, and there's a lot of changes that have been made, but I got about three topics I'd like to cover. But a couple other things I wanted to bring up was, so the inception of Bill 18, the Water Sustainability Act, I believe you guys were in office when that was for sure drafted and probably implemented. And I guess after I'm done, somebody could speak to what your vision or what at the time what your party's vision was for how that was gonna be rolled out and what it was gonna control, because I would hope you had a different vision than how it's getting rolled out now, but if somebody is comfortable speaking to that. And the third point real quick, title and right of land. You know, these water licenses are a title, like our land, and they are tied to our titles of our land. So we're treading in some pretty dangerous territory here when someone takes a title and tells us we're gonna be suspended. You can't suspend a land title. So we're getting into dangerous, it's not even personal freedoms, it's the essential of ownership in this country. So if somebody could speak to that too, thank you very much.
Yeah, so I'm happy to speak to the Water Sustainability Act, and government didn't show up, we did, and we're here to be held accountable as well. So I appreciate that question. Indeed, it was our former government that brought in the Water Sustainability Act. However, I want to be really clear, there was always two key components to that legislation. One was a licensing regime, and the other part was a commitment from our government at the time to undertake the hydrological studies, to do the science and get the data on where water was being pulled from, whether it was from aquifers and wells, or whether it was being pulled out of rivers and streams. And to update that information and have it current, share it with everybody, so it's attached to the license and everyone knows what that science says. So that when there are policy decisions being contemplated by government, they're actually making the decisions with actual science. And it's being done in a transparent fashion with those impacted. We introduced the legislation, we passed the legislation, we were about halfway through implementing the first part, so that licensing regime. This was in 2017, and then there was a change in government. The NDP came to power in July of 2017, and they took over the implementation of the legislation. They completed the first part, the compliance, the licensing piece, but they pulled the commitment with respect to undertaking the science and doing the data. That has never been done, and I would argue that nothing is more obvious as to where government's at on this than to send out a statement to media the night before a meeting like this saying there is science, trust us, but we're not going to share it with you. They haven't done that. They haven't done that work. So it is correct that we introduced the legislation. Our vision at the time was to modernize the inventory of water sources in this province, and for everyone's benefit, to make sure it was transparent and so forth. And that was also part of, because we were talking at that time too, in 2016, 2017, we were looking at the types of pivot irrigation systems and new technology that was coming out, and part of a broader strategy we were working on to actually have government take a bigger role in investing in infrastructure, and working with farmers and ranchers to, frankly, that's where government could play a good role here, is actually come to the table with some real cash to actually help all of you upgrade your systems and your technology that you use to reduce water usage. But the best decisions are those made where you actually have the data at your fingertips, and you know what the science says, and everybody is on the same page with that. So that was the intention, and then it all got screwed up in mid-2017, and the government didn't follow through with the data and the science piece. I think you're quite right, Eric, in terms of your comments about the water license is essentially like it's like a land title. There is a very legal reality to that. There are elements of the Water Sustainability Act which kind of gloss over that piece, and there's obviously some area for improvement there in terms of tightening up what the legislation says and doesn't say in terms of respecting those licenses. So that's the kind of improvement that we can advocate for, and that we would, I think, commit to undertaking as part of a future government. Because you're absolutely right, it should be considered. It certainly is by all of you, and anywhere you talk to would say, those water licenses hold the same weight as a land title. They're basically they're part of it, right? And so we'll look at bringing that forward and improving how that's established. And I just thought the way you treated those young, and they're just being sent out. They're doing a job. They're not the problem. They're reporting to higher ups, and they're young. They're in their 20s. It looked like, and the way you interacted with them, I thought was very, very respectful, and then obviously, a reflection on your character. So thanks.
Yeah, Robert Vanderlip by the first farm coming in from Kamloops on the left there. I've got a very simple message for the government, the present government is stop threatening us about our irrigation rights. We've had enough, and the more you do it, the stronger we get, and the more united we get. And where are the communication skills here? How come they didn't come and talk to us? It's just, for 5 years they've been doing this. License your well or don't irrigate. It's ridiculous. And do they think they can enforce that? No way. They're not going to enforce it. Thanks.
You cut off irrigation, there's less feed, there's less pasture. Small farmers have to buy more hay. There's less hay. Prices of hay go through the roof. Small farmers can't afford to keep their flocks. Flocks and herds are dispersed. Abattoirs go nuts for a couple weeks or a couple months, then they're out of business. Now you have less farmers, and you have less food production. There's the surefire way to cut out food production is to cut off water. And it's not just about water, it's about the whole cycle that follows that. And it seems like they're just looking at very small pieces of this, as in water. Why not work with people and try and sustain small business and farming from every aspect, not just water?
My name is Jim McLaughlin, and I live down on Douglas Lake Road. And so I find it really disrespectful that the government is not showing up here with any representative to help explain what it is that they're up to. From my perspective, the government should be saying, what can we do for you guys? What can we do for all of you people? It's a long weekend, and all of these folks are going to be going home to their farms to work. And so for the government not to show up, not to give some kind of notice, not to come and talk to the people here who have the large farms, who have some history and information who could share, and perhaps help come to a solution around the water. If there is some evidence that the water is short, then there's a lot of folks here that could really help to come to a decision and make some recommendations about how the water could best be used. So their whole approach, I find, is just deplorable. And so for us to apply for a water license, dig a well, put in all the electrical, all the plumbing, everything we need to do to have enough water so that we can actually get a couple of crops and maybe not be shelling out every year just to produce hay. We can actually provide hay to people who need it. So where's the incentive for us to do that? Feels like we're being cut off at the knees at a time in the spring when we actually need the water, and they're going to cut off our ability to use the water license.
I'll just point this out. The very day that this water order came down, the government put out a news release, not about the order. They put out a news release basically encouraging everyone to buy BC and support local producers.
Some fundamental issues or relations in terms of if the water was dropping, why that would be, and they were touched on previously. I'd like to elaborate. There's a correlation between what's happening with respect to these fires that we're seeing. Now we're getting all these intense fires, large fires, very difficult to deal with. Fire's always been a part of the landscape, but there's been a change recently, and it's been because of what's happened with our management of crown lands, with our landscape over the last century.
We're gonna bring this to the forum this week, and I'll let Eric and the crew know, what becomes of it. I can see nothing more than I will be asking for their support to support you. So we'll be doing that, and there again, very proud to be a representative. And thanks to my colleagues at the BC United Party for coming today, and thanks to you for coming out on a Saturday morning. Thank you.
My question is has anybody sent a registered letter, a legal letter, to your other side that's instituting these bills and these things that are saying that this is what you gotta do, that they can come on your land through a locked fence, that they can tell you that you can't take water because they have the studies, and they're coming at you legally and telling you that this is legal. Well, as an opposition, I guess, with all the lawyers and stuff that you know much better than I hope you can understand, but why wouldn't you go on the offense? Why wouldn't you send them a 14-day notice saying that you have 14 days to come up with it in a legal environment at that ecclesiastical level under our rights, our inalienable rights under God, that they say that they uphold in our Charter of Rights, that they swear themselves into office to uphold and protect us. And then they distract us with all this other crap, all these other bills that they're passing. Nobody ever asked me about C11 or C10 or C36, and keep going from there with a higher level of law, which is our human rights. The thing that I understand about human rights and about laws is that if you consent, it's law. If they tell you that this is law and you go, okay, we're going to honor that, but we'd like you to answer a few questions I have about how retarded this is, how absolutely insane this is, that you're talking on both sides of your mouth. There's a lot of wisdom I'm staring at, gentlemen, and I mean no disrespect, and ma'am. But maybe they got us all distracted a little bit. They have 14 days in a legal arena at that level to answer you, or you move on and you start watering.
I'm actually here to ask you some questions. See, I saw that video too. I've been traveling around for a little while. Who here thinks we're talking about water?
No, we're not.
Right? You people are starting to see. Things are turning. Okay? And just because this is happening in slow motion doesn't mean it isn't happening. And we've got well-paid marketers to market it to us. Things are changing in this country. This is going on everywhere. I grew up in Vernon. I'm not a farmer, but I bought some land and I'm learning how to grow food because that's what's going to take to survive what's coming. Total control, supply management. That's how they do it. We've been here before, but none of us know about it because our mainstream political parties, our education systems, our media, most of the corporations are controlled by the perpetrators of those crimes, and they don't teach us about it. I drove here today, I was excited because when I saw that video, I saw some farmers talking, I'm like, this isn't about water. This is about total economic control. They choke you economically, they starve you, and they burn you out. And just because this is happening in slow-mo doesn't mean it isn't happening. There's people that are recognizing this all over. I've been traveling the country all over. People are coming to the same conclusions. We're so far down the road, I don't know if there's a political solution to what we face. They want you eating the bugs.
I think you made your point. Thank you very much.
I'm a new farmer. I grow vegetables, and I know that you can't live on vegetables. Here today, we heard intelligent farmers, ranchers. You guys took the time to be here. Thank you. Thank you for standing up the best you can. I do think Lyle had a very good point on the legal ramifications of the government continually breaching our rights. And I think today, everyone here that spoke has, I heard 82 years, Mr. Bob Jones. You know, there's a lot of depth here in this room. And so we just don't want to finish on that note. It starts here. I don't care if it's the social credit, the NDP, the Liberal. I don't think you guys care either, actually. The reality is, the people's house We are the government. They are not the government. We are the government. It starts with the lobbyists. Who's lobbying them? Is it the UN 2030 agenda that's driving this? Because when I was in university and you need to quote the science, you actually need to quote a scientist. So I'd like to know, the minister, who did he quote? It's not just science. Science just doesn't develop out of thin air. Science is years, 82 years of the scientific method of research. That's the kind of science we're talking about today. I'd like to know the science they're talking about. The other thing is, water is not a lost resource. Water goes into the ground, you water, it goes into the ground, it replenishes the aquifer, it replenishes the river, it evaporates into the sky, and it rains. So if we're messing with the rain, I'll just leave that there. Anyways, I've lived through wildfires, I've lived through drought. I know we're in a very difficult drought, but if there's anyone on the face of this earth that cares about water, it's farmers. Because it either puts money in their pockets and food on their table first, so they can keep doing what they're doing, or it doesn't, and they stop, and we all starve. So thank you very much for taking that message.
And thank all of you for coming out on, here we are on a long weekend, early in the morning in Westwold, talking about issues that you shouldn't have to be spending your time on a long weekend doing this, but I respect all of you for coming out. I may not totally agree with that gentleman's version of what's happening in the world, but I do agree with the frustration. And the frustration is born from the fact that, as someone said here earlier, there's not a single friggin' person from government. Even, they could have sent a deputy or assistant deputy or some director or somebody to just come and hear. Sometimes listening to the public, yeah, I get it, it's not going to be maybe what you want to hear, but they need to listen. Because there's a lot of experience and voices in here that, frankly, can offer a lot of information that would be really useful for government to take care of.
And I'm getting nowhere because I'm on my own. And I'm sure you've all had water discharged onto your land by the Ministry of Transport. Talk about Douglas Lake Road, it's an absolute disgrace. You're lucky to get down there with your load intact when you get to the highway. And all I get from Ministry of Transport is, oh, you should sue your neighbor. Sue my neighbor? For what? You're the guys that discharge the water onto my land. I've hired a lawyer. I've hired a professional hydrologist. I've gone on the government websites. And I'm telling you, I didn't want to go to that mine. Because I get a little bit pissed off. And you can hear it in my voice today. Can we turn our water on today? That's what I want to know. Yeah. There was a question earlier about what is the monetary deficit? The monetary deficit to us, the farmers, the stewards of the land. I'm asking around, and production is down between 30, 40, and even 50% in hay, depending upon where you live. 30, 40, or 50%. So how does that relate to what happens with us as farmers? We needed that last crop to even edge a profit, a meager profit out. We're running behind. And they come along and shut the water off right when we needed that last crop to break even, or to make a meager profit. That's not right. Can we turn the water on today?
This is what our advice would be. And I'll try and speak as plainly as all of you have to us. If government doesn't show up, if government refuses to meet with you, government refuses to answer your questions, it refuses to sit in a room with you, I would turn my fucking water on. Well, the call to action doesn't change. The call here, which has been reasonable from the very beginning, is come and talk to us. Come and answer our questions. Show us the data and the science. Listen to our concerns. Let us work on some solutions together. And they haven't done that. I totally agree with your comments and everyone else saying you're way, way stronger when you act as a community. When you stick together and you all decide to head in a direction. the fact that you all showed up here today, and it was why we called this meeting, why we coordinated. Trudy and the buffs and others were very helpful in helping get the word out. But that's why we took the initiative to get our leader up here, to get 7 of our caucus members up here, to sit here in this room and listen to you, so we can take this forward. You guys band together as a community with one voice and do what you're going to do. We're going to take this message to Victoria. We're going to amplify it down there. We're going to get in the face of the ministers, as we have already. We're going to ask tough questions in the legislature on your behalf. We need you to continue to tell us what's going on. So in terms of the Ministry of Transport issues, you got to contact one of the MLAs up here and get us that information so that we know what the heck is going on, so we can actually add that to the list of things that we put in the government's face in Victoria. That's what our job is. That's why we're here with all of you today. So on that note, I want to thank everyone so much for coming out on a Saturday of a long weekend. I want to particularly also thank my colleagues, Kevin Colvin, the leader of the opposition, Greg Kylo, MLA for Shuswap, Lauren Dirksen, MLA for Caribou Chilcoot.